Hello, and welcome to the Battle Wagon. This is my first Bolt Action video after my rebranding. I've returned to Bolt Action today to review the game updates found in the brand new Errata. Warlord said many times that it would come by the end of 2023, but hey, better late than never, right? Just kidding, there's no Errata. But don't give up or let Warlord get you down. Honestly, I've had a polyamorous relationship with Bolt Action lately, as I've been playing Star Wars Legion and lots of Legions Imperialis. Luckily for you, I have a sweaty tournament in a couple months. To help prepare for this event, I wanted to take a deep dive into the math behind some of the top-level Dakka choices. I started by looking at 8 units that have considerable firepower. The M3 Stuart with hull and pintle machine guns, the M1542, Tokarev, Early War Panzer III, M3 Stuart with just hull LMGs but no pintle, Quad 50 cal loadout, Quad light autocannon setup, and finally, the SD KFC 251/21 drilling. Notably absent is the Kugelblitz because, frankly, I didn't remember it until halfway through making this video and I didn't want to redo my graphs. Here's a chart of the number of hits statistically average for each one of those units. One of the most interesting things to note is the dip in what you might expect to be an otherwise straight line. But this is what happens from rounding, especially when factoring in a nigh impossible shot, or however your region refers to it, a 7, super 6s, 6 followed by a 6, whatever. Obviously, the more attacks a unit has, the more hits you can expect. So let's work on developing this data into wounds. But before we do that, not all weapons are created equally, as some of these weapons are light autocannons, which have options for shooting either high explosive or armor-piercing rounds. I've often wondered exactly when I should use HE over AP. It's been just a feel up until this point. Here's a graph of the number of wounds a quad light autocannon statistically averages when using each option against regular infantry. Since I'm expecting to face formidable opponents, I consider the first HE template to cover 2 soldiers, with each additional hit getting 1 additional chance to wound. That and rounding is the reason for the variation in the straight line. Interestingly, these calculations converge when the to-hit roll needed is a 4, and AP is only better when the target is very easy to hit. Consequently, for the remainder of this scenario, I'm going to plan on using the HE option. Now that we've established that HE is the best option for autocannons, this chart demonstrates the statistical average wounds for each unit. When hitting on a 6, all 8 units average somewhere between 1.33 and 2 wounds. Notably, the autocannons start off strong because you get 2 chances to wound with only 1 hit, and the Quad 50 plus 1 penetration overtakes the autocannons when hits come to more easily. Aside from that variation, this chart is extremely similar to the original one with average hits. However, it's not really fair to compare only damage output when there are other factors in the points calculation. A soft-skinned vehicle can have the same number of attacks as a tank. One great example of this is the Soviet Tokarev and the M1542, both having 20 machine gun shots. One has 2 more armor than the other. Additionally, some vehicles can spread their shots against several units. For example, the 1542 has 2 mountings, while the Tokarev only has 1. This can potentially cause additional pins. Another factor is motive. Wheels are going to be the least expensive, fastest, but can't position a rough ground. Tracks are the slowest, typically found on armored fighting vehicles. Half tracks are a mix and typically cost 5 extra points. Notably, 5 points in a 150-point vehicle is less than 4% of its cost, which is rather negligible, so I'm inclined to lean toward half tracks if possible. Weapon versatility is another factor. Being able to shoot AP rounds allows you to threaten vehicles as well as infantry. You may need to include dedicated AT options during list selection if your Dakka threat can only target infantry. Lastly, most Dakka vehicles have to close within 36 inches for machine guns, so autocannons have a slight range advantage. So let's take a look at each armor level and calculate their regular casualties per 100 points, or what I'm going to start referring to as firepower. Coming in at 6 armor are the Tokarev from the armies of the Soviet Union, US Quad 50 gun truck from the Errata, Opel Blitz from Flak Vierling with the armies of Germany version 2. All of these vehicles are limited to 1 target, and while all these options are wheeled, Germany can take the SDKFC 7.2 half-track for 5 additional points more than the Opel Blitz. I've chosen not to include motorcycles or any vehicles in the armored car slot. I've also chosen to drop attack rolls of Super 6s because of the unlikelihood and unreliability of those attacks. Unfortunately, there's no contest to just how good the Quad Maxim machine gun Tokarev is over the US and German comparables. If only the Soviets had alternative AT options they could use, like Panzerfaust, Ampulamets, scouts with AT grenades, or dog mines, they might actually be a good country. I'm joking, of course. Moving on to 7+ armored carriers, the M16 multiple gun motor carriage from Armories of the US easily outperforms both the up-armored SDKFC 7-2 and the SDKFC 251-21 from Armies of Germany version 2. All of these vehicles are open-topped, half-track, able to target only one unit. Notably, Germany has the option to instead take the up-armored Opel Blitz, which trades the half-tracks for wheels in order to save 5 points, but if you recall, we want half-tracks. The German vehicles so far don't compete well against the Allied equivalent, only their advantage being able to fire AP rounds. Coming in for the 8+ category are the M3 Stuart with hull LMGs, but no Pintle, which is available to several Allied nations, the Polizei M1542 from Fortress Budapest, and the Errata Early Panzer III. These are what I'm going to call the big three and are quite similar but vary in minute details. All of these vehicles are tracked with an option for shooting a light AT gun instead of some machine gun shots. The M3 Stuart has a 13.5 split on its machine guns with a Pintle option for an additional 5. You have to trade in 6 machine gun shots for firing light AT. It has vulnerable slides, which can be offset by the fact you can take recce on it for some nations. And if you really want to make some historical players angry, Soviets can mount a full squad of tank riders. The Polizei M1542, while as an Italian tank, can be found in the Fortress Budapest book, but it is a German unit. It can split the machine gun shots 10 and 10, notably because they do not get Hitler's buzzsaw rule, and trade 10 machine gun shots for firing the main gun light AT. The Panzer III C, D, E, and F Aufs have machine gun split of 12-6 and have to trade 12 machine gun shots for firing the main gun light AT. While the Polizei and the Panzer III can be more aggressively naturally, because they do not have the vulnerable sides, they can often act earlier in the round. The Stuart, however, wants to rely on a recce to overcome vulnerable sides and use any added firepower as a last order die in a round, and can often take the Pintle MMG as a useful upgrade. All of these tanks are solid options. The last thing I wanted to do was compare all of the German units. The potential wounds per 100 points are far better on the A+ light tanks than any other vehicle. I've even included the 9+ quad light autocannon Wirbelwind and T-34 options from one of the new books. Unfortunately, it's not even close. This is extremely disappointing considering the Opel Blitz with quad light autocannon and 251 drilling cost the same as each of the tanks. All is not lost though. There are a few takeaways to consider when dealing with anti-infantry Dakka tanks, which are limited to 36 inches, or 48 inches if they have a light autocannon. If you're looking to deal with these vehicles, you may want to consider weaponry that has a half range of at least 30 inches. Notably, the heavy autocannon has 72-inch range, meaning that at 30 inches, it has the same penetration value as a light AT gun with twice the dice. Additionally, the medium AT gun has a 60-inch range, meaning that at just under 30 inches, it has 2 more penetration than a light AT gun. When targeted by a Dakka tank, don't be afraid of going down to mitigate the damage they can do. There has been many a game where I position a unit late in one turn so that it becomes a distracting target the next turn, with the intention of simply going down. As a player in the US, we tend to see larger sized people, I mean unit sizes, which fall victim to Dakka strikes. By splitting infantry into smaller units, you can mitigate some of the casualties. Of course, the benefits and drawbacks of doing this are a discussion for another time. Sometimes focusing all of your firepower on a unit can give you an advantage, but it can feel bad when your opponent simply rallies off a bunch of pins. This is kind of a general strategy for Bolt Action, but for that reason, unless you are looking to kill a unit, you may want to stop just after a couple pins. A unit on 2 pins has the choice of whether to spend its turn rallying or risk passing the to-order test and shooting with -$1 shots. It's probably not even worth it to shoot a rifle at an open-topped vehicle that already has 2 pins, for example. And that's all I have for today. I hope you have a great day. Adieu.